I was in the Army from 1982 to 1986, and I got money for college. And I did travel. That's when I started going to different places around the world. I was stationed in Augsburg, Germany for 2 years. And when I was on my breaks, I would love to jump on a train and go see different places. So that was another part of my journey that led to where I am today with all of this research. Just by being in different places and picking up what's there, memories of things. And then when I got out of the Army, I went to college and I got a degree in social work and psychology. And I was a geriatric social worker most of my career. And that was between like 1989, and I stopped working as a social worker around 2003, I believe. And then I've done other things professionally since that time. So I didn't ever go back into social work. I think I was burned out on it by that time. And I've lived in a lot of different places. I've been fascinated by megaliths most of my life. And I would watch, as soon as it came out on the internet, megalithmania conferences with a lot of different earth energy researchers, and watch their stuff and be absolutely fascinated by things being the same all over the world. I think we talked before, Dustin, that we have the same
Sure have. Yep.
have the same
Dan
influences.
Hancock, Robert Schoch,
Exactly.
Pavot. Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, I think the very first alternative history book I ever read was Robert Bauval's Orion Mystery. And I read Fingerprints of the Gods, and just fascinated. It's like, who did that? How's that possible? But that was my education. And the other part of my education was learning about sacred geometry. And I lived in Fairbanks, Alaska from 94 to 99, and then I moved back there in 2006 and lived there from 2006 to 2012. And it's like my whole life has been this journey, I think, to uncovering this information, because it's like everything I've ever experienced has something to do with it. And so I learned about sacred geometry around 2007 in a Flower of Life workshop. And John Melchizedek was a teacher that brought this information back, and I followed his work closely for about 6 years during that time. And he made a video in 2010 called Birth of a New Humanity. And he talked about an actual physical grid that was constructed. And I'm thinking, okay, who could have done that? But that was the very first time that I had any concept of an Earth grid, and that it was actually physical. And when I moved to Oklahoma City to help with my mom, when my brother moved her from Florida, that period of time that I was there was when I really started to wake up to this ancient civilization and make my own discoveries and start doing my own research. And you have the graphic of the map with the star tetrahedron on it. I have the actual map in front of me, but you're going to see it better if it's on the screen. So that's the flower of life, and all sacred geometric shapes are contained in that, and that's actually the creation pattern of the universe. Everything's based on the flower of life. And so the actual map is here. It's tattered, it's torn, but this is really where my own journey started and my own original research. And since I had already known about sacred geometry and the research that I talked about with megalithomania and ley lines and things like that, I had it sitting, pull it back up just again real quick. Yeah, that kind of thing. All those patterns are contained within it, the Platonic solids. And it's important knowledge. The ancients knew all about this stuff. It's also connected with vortex-based mathematics. So I had this map sitting on my dining room table. And by this time I was traveling with friends of mine to places once I started to figure out that there was a code of cover-up words that were calling ancient infrastructure natural features. Words like bluff, cliff, canyon, mesa. And waterfalls is another one. I mean, there's just so many things. This was an amazing civilization that goes back to ancient times. And what people think are natural were man-made. And that's how they've managed to cover it up. I live in Sedona and I'm surrounded by ancient infrastructure. But people see red rocks and they're amazed at how amazing nature is. And, they don't see the infrastructure that's actually there. And it's laid out in sacred geometric patterns here. There's a tree of life here. There's a star tetrahedron. There's a pentagram. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff and it's all connected. So you can find that in a book by Mark Amaru Pinkham called Sedona, City of the Star People. And he talks about the sacred geometry that's here. And it's actually since I moved here that this has really taken off for me. So, I might be soaking in some of the energies that are here as well. But to go back to the map, I found the star tetrahedron by connecting the cities that I was seeing lining up in lines. And I found the first tetrahedron where the apex is in Edmonton. And then I thought, okay, well, I found that, maybe I can find another one. And so I found the bottom apex, which is in Merida, Mexico. And then I extended the lines out and I had to switch to a globe. And I guess I have to insert that my work is not driven by whether or not Earth is flat or round. I'm following Earth alignments, and I've gotten a tremendous amount of information from my research just following alignments.
Can I say something on that?
Uh-huh.
The pattern still works on the flat, for sure. It still makes a flower pattern, as a matter of fact. Hold on one second.
And that's what I find as well, that it works either way. The important thing is the sacred geometry and the ley lines. And in my research, even though my passion is the ancient civilization and bringing it back to awareness, I have found evidence that our perception of space and time was tampered with. And I do talk about that in different places. Showing where the globe came in and who invented it and when they did. And ancient maps are flat and they have ley lines on them, the older maps. And they took the ley lines off and they turned it into a globe. So even though that's still not what drives my work, it definitely gives me pause, and I can say, yeah, I found evidence that all of that was tampered with. So anyway, once I found the star tetrahedron and I extended the lines out, and I had to switch to a globe because I couldn't visualize where the lines were going on the other side. I needed the visual to continue plotting the alignments. And what that resulted in is about 19 pages of spreadsheets with data points of cities and places in alignment. And all of my research is based on these alignments. And had I not done the work of tracking the alignments in a number of my blog posts, which I turn into videos, had I not done that research, I would not have gotten the rest of the picture. It was following the alignments that showed me not only the true and original history of the Earth, but how it was taken down and how everything's been rewritten and revised to bring us to the world we live in today and where we are at this moment with all the Twilight Zone stuff happening. So my work on the alignments has led me to uncovering history and how all this has taken place. And I did have a Moorish American friend when I lived in Oklahoma, and he brought the piece about the Moors into my life because I didn't know about the Moors before then. And learning about the Moors and Moorish science, which is based on sacred geometry, and how they've been removed from the historical record, collective awareness, but they were the actual builders of civilization. And within the Moorish civilization, there were different empires, and Tartaria was one of them, Barbaria was one of them. um, the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire, um, empires within empire. And so it's Mu, Moor actually refers to Mu, which is better known as Lemuria. But that goes back into ancient times, and their civilization was continuous, I think, up until relatively recently. And then negative beings figured out a way to create a cataclysm and destroy the original civilization. I think that's where the mud flood comes in. And then the controllers, the 1%, the corporation, the founding families of the corporation, and the richest people in the world are the ones that are behind what took place. And I don't believe it was natural, because I think had it been a natural event, we wouldn't be sitting here talking today. Everybody would have been, wiped out. But they were obviously prepared and ready and did a lot of work to create a new history and create the control mechanisms that we've been living under, which I believe they reverse engineered the grid system from a positive life enhancing force into a control mechanism. And so that's,
the inversion flip.
Yeah, and they just reversed it all, and they've kept us under this system without telling us, and feeding us a false history, and educating us in it, and then reinforcing it with movies and music and television programming, so that we would not see what's actually in the environment around us and know the true history. And I think the show that Berserker Bear has put together for us today will clearly show that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, Michelle. And I agree with you 100% that I think that's also a dual purpose, the utility of them showing that truth in media, whether it's music, movies, even games. I think they believe it relieves them of their karmic duty, because they are telling the truth in a certain way. Right, and it's whether or not you get it, right? There's a great scene in a movie that I haven't watched yet. It's called Under the Silver Lake, where the guy's playing the piano and he's telling the protagonist of the movie, there is truth in media, and it's something that if you don't get it, then it's not meant for you. And there's no right and wrong in that. It's some people attribute right and wrong and to that. It just is. It's the constant yin and yang of the black and the white. It's always going to be there. You just got to find a way to navigate through it, as we all are right now. So thank you very much. So let's get right into it. I'm just going to ask questions that are related. I gave you the outline, and we're just going to go down through it, and I'm sure there'll be enough generated talk back and forth just from these questions. So if you're ready to go, I got everything. I got my coffee, and I appreciate everybody being here. Canada Dummy, and yeah, please hit the like button, if you will. I appreciate it. So let's do some, and as we talk about it, Michelle, I'll go through and pull up the related or whatever you want me to bring up.
Okay, and also I've got tabs up on mine. We've got some echo right now. Okay, that's better. So I've got tabs up as well, so I'll be sharing my screen as we go through the questions.
Okay, cool. Let me know, because I'll stop sharing. And do you want to share a screen right now and see if we can?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
And now you share. Can you share it?
Yep, I'm going to share it now. And then I'm just going through the questions that you gave sequentially. Because this one relates to the very first one.
Cool.
I'm going to. So go ahead.
No.
So this is the question of the differences between fortresses, citadels, castles, and palaces.
Yeah, how come it's not sharing your screen though, Michelle? Actually, you know what? Add to stream. Here we go. That's easy. This is easy. Okay, cool.
Cool. Okay. So what I found is when I was following the alignments, I kept finding star forts. I wasn't looking for them originally, and then I realized that when I looked, I was always going to find them. And I found them under different names. So fortresses, citadels, castles, and palaces. Um, and we're going to be tying a lot of different information in. So I'll save my finding out about star forts for another question that you have for me.
Well, yeah, you know what? As a matter of fact, Michelle, if you want to take the helm and share your screen while I ask you the questions and things that I show related, or when I need to bring up the examples of the videos I have, we'll do that. But and then let me know when you want to bounce something off of me. So we'll go through and we'll um,
Okay.
or if you want me to share mine, it's okay. Whatever you feel.
Okay. Let me figure out what I did because I thought I was screen sharing.
We have the Martin Liedke effect here for you guys. You know,
I'm
side
going to,
thumbs for Martin.
okay, I'm going to share screen again. I'm sorry. I thought I had it in there.
Don't worry about it. We're firing from the hip here. This is how we do it like in Tartaria. So you're good.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you
Yeah.
see it now?
I could see it. Yep. And now I got you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's
Okay.
add it.
Great.
All right. Here, check it out. There you go.
Okay. Well, let me start here. This brings in Sylvie and New Earth.
Right. So what are the differences between the fortress? So the first question I had was, what are the differences between fortresses, citadels, castles, palaces? Because in mainstream, star forts are actually called bastion forts. So Michelle will detail her findings on that.
Okay. So what I was finding as I followed the alignments, and I wasn't originally looking for them, were star forts. And again, star forts are everywhere. And I found them being called citadels, like you said, fortresses, castles, and palaces. And when I did this consistent finding of star forts on planetary alignments, I went back and looked at circle alignments that I did. And, starting in Merida, I found two in Campeche, which is close to Merida. And I want to make the point that I find star forts in pairs and in clusters. But I also found them called different names, and they were still star forts. And I'm just going to, and different shapes. And that's the point that I wanted to make when Dustin and I first started talking about this program. And I saw his one on the pier near where he lives that he fished on the other day. There are a lot more atypical star forts out there that aren't even called what we're talking about now. They're piers. I found the R.C. Harris water treatment plant in Toronto as being one of these so-called star forts. And I can show you that example as we go through this. That one kind of looks like a beak. That's in the Bahamas. This one's in the Florida Keys. It's on Dry Tortugas National Park, and it's called Fort Jefferson. So it's further west of Key West, so you can only get there by ferry or boat. And one of the really interesting things about this is that it's the largest brick masonry structure in the United States, made with over 16 million bricks, and it's the third largest fort, and said to have been built between 1845 and 1861. And I think this is one that Cameron has talked about on Autodidactic as well. So
Yeah.
there's these inconsistencies.
And
Um,
USA.
and the stories that were told about them are just really absolutely ridiculous. So we'll talk more about that as we go through our presentation today. How they're explaining their existence just makes no sense. This is in Bermuda, and Bermuda actually used to have a bunch of star forts. There are some that are still in existence, like Fort Hamilton. Where that looks like they just added the cannon here to these bastions, and then you find, the circular ones, you find pointy ones, all different kinds, just add a cannon here and there. And these are also in Bermuda. And at one time, this little island was full of them. So this is a 1624 map that's attributed to Captain John Smith, who's best known for Jamestown, Virginia, and Pocahontas, and that whole story. I don't have it pulled up, but I found a structure in Edinburgh, Scotland, that looks like this, but it's a housing area now, residential area. And then I found a connection between Fernando Noronha and Bermuda. And Fernando de Noronha is like Bermuda in that it's a small island that's loaded with star forts. And then I did research on the Channel Islands off the coast of France. They're a British Crown dependency, but the Channel Islands are loaded with star forts, and that makes a point of a triangle here between Bermuda and Fernando de Noronha. So I think that had some kind of energy generation function. This is a very old star fort in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai here. And the Russians are credited with that, but it looks really ancient.
Shout out to Philip.
And then, let's see, star forts in Mexico. Again, you get these different shapes going here. Again, they're in pairs. Beautiful one in Veracruz. These are all in Veracruz. Okay, let's see. Said to have been built between 1770 and 1776 as a guard post and repository for treasure before its shipment to Spain. I found Amsterdam Island in the South Indian Ocean, and as a starting point for one of my alignments. Interesting things down there are the geomagnetics of the island. And then when I was following that, and this is another example, the Citadel Fort Adelaide in Port Louis, which is the capital of Mauritius, which is an island republic in the South Indian Ocean. And again, called a citadel, but when you look at it from the air, you're still seeing, the points on top of a high hill. I mean, these people were building in very, very hard to get to places. So they were very comfortable with what they were doing. Move this guy up here. This is in Somalia, in Mogadishu, and you find this Citadel of Gondarshe. And then this is a circuit-looking fortress in northern Somalia.
Circuit. Shout out to Jerry, the circuit board.
And then this little
meltdown.
This little fortress called an architectural masterpiece built on the foot of a rock to protect the city from Bedouin attacks. It just doesn't look like a defensive structure to me. What a strange place to build it, right? Another thing is in the Yemen, known as the Malram Bilqis, or the Sanctuary of the Queen of Sheba. And one of the interesting things that you find there is this old South Arabian inscription, which looks like runes. And so I put the Norse runes there for comparison. And I have Hebner as an example in something else that I wanted to show you, but this is called the Hebner runestone in Oklahoma. And it's a massive rock that's encased in this wooden shelter. And the story is that the Vikings were wandering through the area and carved these runes, and they play it up at the visitor center. And that reminds me a lot of the Gosford glyphs in Australia, because you got runes there. And in both of these places, it's sitting in ancient infrastructure. And I've got an example of that in something else, so I'm going to show you. So that's another way they deflect from people seeing what's really there. They just focus people's attention on one thing. And I think it's real. I think the symbols are real. And that was the original language that the ancients used and part of their mastery of how to harness natural energy to create amazing things. Okay, so I'm just going through the differences. This is the Al Fahidi Fort in Dubai. It's a museum now, but I think it has some circuitry looking features here. And this is a really long piece, but I'll just go through a few more examples. On the island of Hormuz in the Strait of Hormuz, it's part of southern Iran, we find what's called the Old Portuguese Fort, and it was said to have been built after the Portuguese captured the island in 1507. And I found this map of Hormuz and a lot of stuff going on here. And so you've got the Old Portuguese Fort, so-called Portuguese fort here, and then on the other side you have what appears to be another star fort. And then now you don't see that other star fort, but you do see, like up in this part here of the picture, you see something that looks like circuitry chips.
Yep, and it's interesting that they're on each side of a body of water. That's what we have here in Buffalo, and up in Lewiston, and Fort Erie, or Fort Niagara. Yep.
Yep. We can talk about it more as we go through this, but I definitely think they were serving as batteries, actual batteries.
Talk about that. Yep. You know what I want to do actually? I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And I'm going to show the different facets of bastion forts, what they're saying, and per the mainstream, of course. So you see that. So I think some of what we're seeing are, what you pointed out, could just be something like so you see D is a raveline. There's actually a distinction for that being a fort. So it could be smaller pieces of bigger things. So what they're saying here, a facet of a larger star, D as a raveline, could be this big. Something like this. So we could just be seeing smaller parts of the bigger thing that were, like you said, dismantled and taken down, or like New Earth said, some portions of them aren't even like it's confusing if you say it's to defend against an attack, because some sides of them, some are open, the flanks are open, some have our body of water. It just doesn't make sense. That was a great point that she was saying, and the videos that I'm referencing from our viewers, again, I'll put in our description. But yeah, so I want to show actually as well the we're going to do the actual mainstream definition clip here, Michelle, the one that I sent you as a just so people see what we're saying here. This is a mainstream video that explains the definition of what they say a bastion fort is. So here we go.
You might need to share your screen again and put click the sound button.
Oh, yep, you're right. Good call. So let's do this. I'm glad you trained me on that.
Okay. I just found out.
How perfect.
Within the last 2 weeks.
Perfect. So clutch. Okay, so share audio. This one, share. Thank you, Michelle. You're the best. I learned so much from you.
Medieval fortresses were usually built high or on hills to make it possible to rain down arrows on approaching enemies. But these straight and tall walls, curtain walls, proved vulnerable to cannon fire. After the invention of gunpowder in the 9th century in China, the first depictions of cannons appeared there in the 12th century. Spreading west across the Eurasian continent, they were widespread in Europe and the Middle East by the end of the 14th century. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a wake-up call. Its massive walls were seen as impenetrable, but Sultan Mehmed II used his powerful cannons to breach even these walls, proving medieval design was no longer effective. The epitome of classic European cannon design was reached around 1480, with the design not changing much all the way until the 17th.
Possible hydraulic water monitors, in my opinion. Possibly. Cannonballs.
50s. And it's in this time we also see defensive architecture change as a response to this formidable foe. Gone were the tall towers and straight walls of medieval forts, and in came the bastion fort, or star fort. Although not a new invention, these fortresses had low, sloped earthen banks called glacis. These were sloped on the outside towards any possible attacker, and made it difficult for cannon fire to seriously damage the citadel behind them. By creating these jutting bastions, the flanks or curtains of a fortress could be overseen, eliminating dead zones.
Okay, then it goes into talk about the moats and everything, and we're talking about dead zones. We're talking about fire. Now, what mainstream is saying here is that those beautiful designs, those intricate designs that are not only masonry construction, but earthworks as well, because the actual land is shaped to the star as well, is only done specifically for what you just seen. And what we're proposing is that seems hokey. Allegedly, could it be? And we're just proposing questions, and it's kind of the work that we do. That's the crux of the issue here. That's what they say bastion forts are, and that's what we're doing here, presenting anomalies in the mainstream. So, what do you think about that, Michelle?
Totally. And I think between the two of us, we're going to give some really great examples of the ridiculousness of what we're told in the historical narrative.
How dare you?
And not only that, I mean, it certainly seems from the research I'm doing that wars and armed conflicts were really focused on destroying a lot of these beautiful structures.
Absolutely. Now, here's a good example, because look, what I always say is, you see the star pattern here, right? If you zoom in, it's industry. And what that just speaks to me, a logical thought progression is they're like covering up, hiding it, dismantling it, quarrying it. And because look now, I mean, you can hardly tell. Well, there's actually a good, in this one, you can hardly even see what they tried. This is why I think that this might have been a canal back in the day, but you lose the shape of it. You can literally see the progression of industry encroachment on these things. And I think Buffalo is a really good example of that, because we know for sure you have them. Here's the thing, you know for sure you have them on different points. And there's a matter of fact, on the heads of rivers and the foot of them, like you just detailed. You had that in Buffalo,
Mhm.
but they hid the one in South Buffalo. And let me just pull that
Yeah.
up and show you an example. I should have had this pulled up already.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what they've done here.
So yeah, that's what they say. The mainstream says that the bastion forts are for. There obviously is one hidden that I was fishing on in Buffalo, and now I'm gonna go. We'll go on to the next question, but I just want to illustrate real quick on this platform how things are hidden. Shouldn't be lagging too much like that. Okay, so here's Buffalo. I'm glad I was right here. Can you see that? There's Fort Erie, and we got a for sure star fort right there. Okay. Right across the way is where it should be in Buffalo, where I was fishing.
Mhm.
Okay. That's what it used to look like. These are Library of Congress maps. You see the star fort here, and then it's lost here. They do that purposely, for sure. Also, I can double down on that with when they present stuff like this in books that I look up that on the internet. This is an 1812 Niagara frontier during the War of 1812. You can't find this picture too easily on the internet. This X right here demarcates that Fort Erie star. So that's why I say guarantee this was a star here, because it's even labeled on this 18. And again, the War of 1812, I have the clip of that. The guy says you won't find a cornerstone before 1813. And you got a star marker here in Buffalo. And other pictures of this, Michelle, that X is gone. So they do try to fudge it out. Yeah, so that's my argument, and I'm sticking to it. They definitely paved paradise.
Yes, they did. And they profit from it, because we're talking about energy. And so the modern energy industry is based on this ancient technology. I have no doubt about that.
I agree. So let's go on to the next one, referring back to New Earth and a lot of work that she does. Also, I have to mention my good friend, another researcher is Philip. It has a lot of Philip Druzinin has a lot of videos about star forts too. And I was going to mention him also. But what's New Earth's name? I forget her name.
Sylvie, I think it's Sylvie Ivanova.
Sylvie, yeah, the most like pleasing voice in the entire internet. Plus her channel is fascinating. Okay, so let's get into the next one. Do you agree?
I mean, she's been doing this work for a long time, and she was definitely part of my journey. So I'm really glad that you had that as a question, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, Michelle, you know what? Let me end mine. Yeah, you said you watched that video of hers in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I did one of the very first blogs that I did was about star forts, and I learned so much more than I did when I did that. Can you see my screen?
I sure can. Let me add it. Now, I got married in 2015, Michelle.
Yeah, I mean,
I was doing in 2015. You were woke to this.
I was waking up to this. It was before I found the star tetrahedron in North America in 2015, but it was part of my journey to waking up to all of that. And I was starting to figure things out. And Sylvie was one of the few channels at the time that was doing this kind of work. And so I watched a number of her videos then. And so that was in 2015, and 2016 was the year this started taking off for me. And when I found the star tetrahedron. And star forts are really a gateway topic to this subject, because a lot more people know about star forts and ask questions.
Yeah, they're so visually engaging and beautiful, right to the eye. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think this is the actual one that you showed that graphic of, the Fort Fortange in the Netherlands.
Okay.
Beautiful one, lacy one. This one's in Portugal. And Hakodate in Hokkaido, Japan.
All over.
And I found this also following an alignment. When I was tracking it, I went right across this place in Hokkaido. Pulmonova, the one that you showed already, which looks to me a lot like CERN.
Definitely. I think at a certain level, these guys model it after that and try to make it look like that,
Yeah, I mean, there's real technology behind all of this. And I linked her video in this particular blog post. And then this is a much shorter one done by somebody else. And so that was in around, I think, November or December of 2015. And it was my very first introduction to the subject, like I said. But what happened within like just a couple of months, somebody mentions Statue of Liberty being on a star fort, and that's Fort Wood. It's 11 points.
Put their stamp on it.
Mm-hmm. So within like a couple of months, I was at Heavener Runestone State Park that I just mentioned a little bit ago. And I saw this, that same pattern here. You get worked stone here, and I'm going to show you another example. This is at Heavener Runestone State Park.
It reminds me of my homework assignment that you gave me.
And this is on the outskirts of the park. This isn't even where the runestone is. I mean, there's no attention drawn to the part of the park that's not where the runestone is. And you see these beautiful walls. And I took more pictures when I was there that I didn't include in here.
There's an interesting point I want to make here that I talked with, I'm not sure, my buddy Campbell knows familiar, Mr. Brees. He's a good researcher too. My homie, I talk with him a lot, and we throw ideas back and forth. He's probably sleeping right now. I think it's the other side. He's in Queensland. So Cam, thanks for staying with us, homie. But yeah, he was put the notion out there, or told me, like, when they designate an area as a state park, that means that it's like the cleaner's been through it. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
Good for the public to go in and not deduce as much, and la-di-da, walk through the trails and not be like, oh, that's possibly a castle, an old citadel. That's like it's also a sign, the communication that this house is clear, type of deal.
And along with that, it's also where you can find the ancient civilization preserved, and that was part of my journey in uncovering this when I started looking
for it. Definitely.
When I started looking at national, state, and local parks, because if they're not preserved, they tend to be destroyed by construction and things like that, new roads and new housing developments and things. So anyway, like within months of learning about star forts, I saw that at Heavener Runestone State Park, those pointed shapes. And then I was watching this video. It's a music video called Climbing in Geometry.
That was fascinating, that picture.
And I noticed that. I don't know what the heck that is, but somebody pointed it out. I didn't notice it at first.
Oh, no, it looks like it just added into it, but that's the real formation of an outcropping that looks similar to what a star fort would be. Yeah.
That's so I noticed that, and then I Googled climbing in geometry, and this was really when I started to get it. It was a very intuitive, synchronistic process for me. And I grew up near Carter Rock in Maryland. I didn't ever think anything of it, but I found this description in this blog post called Roped Up Climbing at Carter Rock. And he talked about this climber was going up it, and he described thoughtful moves on polished slabs. And this is called Jungle Cliff there. And Carter Rock is also the home of the Naval Sea Systems Command. And I don't remember if you and I were talking about this just a little while ago, or I think I was talking about it with somebody last night. They build military installations on top of power nodes. Camp David, the presidential retreat in Western Maryland, is also built on a powerful place.
Most famous, I'm sure, people know Area 50, Area 15. We'll try to escape the bots. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And you're in the area that you are is known for being a hot spot as well, right, mm-hmm. Michelle?
Yeah, it is. And like I said, I think I probably benefited from living here.
I believe it. I think the same, honest to goodness, I think the same thing with the water, with the flowing water of Niagara River. And I think that some of it is still going underground. We could talk about that, like that on the outline, the Ghostbusters, the inversion of Ghostbusters too. Truth in media, we've addressed that already, which is great.
Yeah, so I just stopped sharing my screen.
Okay, perfect. So so do you agree when Sylvie says that they appear to be strategic, built strategic, and she points out extremely well that some of the sides aren't completely sealed off and that they're open, and some of the arrows are what you would call the definition would be the ravelins are pointing inwards. What do you think that speaks to? Because it doesn't make sense as far as if an invading army is coming, or like it just said in those cannons. I know it's a big one. What do you think?
I think the ancients knew exactly what they were doing, and everything has a reason and a purpose within the planetary free energy generating grid system. I think everything was precisely placed from ancient to relatively modern, because we're still using their infrastructure every day. Schools, churches, cathedrals, uh, bridges, museums, you name it. We're still using their infrastructure. So I think
let me show you something, Michelle. This comes from the fellow researcher here that I have on IG. I'm going to share my screen and see what you think about this. Okay, this is an experiment that he does. I call Mr. Wizard. It's Moon Jazz Bear, another fellow, fan of Owen Benjamin, comedian. But a lot of us like to research this stuff, and look at this experiment that he did regarding radios and radio patterns.
mm-hmm. I came across that recently.
Okay, cool. So you
It's
get
fascinating.
little synchronicity.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this not playing?
The civilization that was here before bears no resemblance to what we're taught in our history.
So this is
It
interesting
was
here.
different.
What he's doing, okay. Can you see that? He's taking a laser and pointing it through a prism that's on the ground. And see where the points are meeting? It's actually creating a radio pattern that's emanating out. Circle. There you go. See if I could stop it on it. Boom. See where at this nexus point, it's a radio pattern. And I wonder, what they say, the Lechtenberg event and anything, if the sun, the luminary, does act as a lens, that them radio patterns may have been seared. We think that these huge electrical events, it may have happened. Cam and I've discussed that before. You're aware of them. Look at that's literally demonstrating that if you point a laser through what's acting as a prism or the lens, it could be the sun. That's possible, and that's just another possibility of what could have. I think they may. I'm not saying it did happen. It's a possibility that's one way that radio patterns were established, because I think the whole narrative of the Ellicott brothers making the radio patterns in 2 days is ridiculous.
Did you have a place in mind to show that clip about the frequencies effect on the water?
Let's do it
Or
right now.
Is this a good place?
Very good place. So how they're made, great. Thank you for bringing this up. So this is a video that you guys can look up, and it's called Amazing Water Sound Experiment. And Michelle and I were, hypothesizing how these things are made. And we're just going to show this to you. Now, this was shared to me by another fellow researcher on our MeWe channel, Andrew Booth, who's in Mississauga, another mud-flooded old world city. And I'd like to get him on a video like this, because he does kind of boots on the ground as well. Again, Andrew Booth, I'm not sure if he's here, but he sent me this, and he was just postulating, could this be a way in which star forts were made? Well, let's take a look at it. Of course. Sorry about that. Yeah, of course, right?
Darn YouTube and their ads.
You guys can see my music playlist.
I don't even monetize my YouTube channel, and I still get them.
Yeah, I take it off. I literally, I keep a couple of them on. I play with them, I don't need it. Okay, so what they're doing, here you go. See that? Okay. Boom. Star. or right angles. That's crazy.
Mhm.
It's falling water.
And I know when you asked me about it, I definitely think they were utilizing frequency in whatever way they did this. I mean, cymatic patterns are really clear in this infrastructure.
This is a good one. Look at that. Sound, Walls of Jericho sound, the horn of Helm Hammerhen in Lord of the Rings. They marched around the city of Jericho and the walls came down when they blew the horns. Has to be addressed. Very, very, very interesting. Yeah, look at that. There you go. Just something to ponder, something to keep on the table. Excellent share, Andrew Booth, my man. So there you go. Yeah, I'm not sure how that would happen, but if you take into account the possibility of the Lechtenberg event, you can't take that kind of stuff off of the table, right? So let's move right along here. Regarding star forts and water and the power generators, perfect segue. Do you believe that they were ancient power generators? Keeping in mind that New Earth says that water is a key component in extracting the gas. That's one thing that we think that these things are, is gas.
Mhm.
That they were extracting gas in the videos that you cited from New Earth. And what are your best theories as to the application of, these alleged harnessed energies? What was the mechanism of delivery? To what end, what terminal, how was it used? I mean, literally, what do we use it for? What was the utility of it? I know it's free energy. How was it transferred?
I do have answers to your questions, but that's that's a big subject.
I'm just rattling off.
But I could definitely put forth what I think was going on. And that question also talks about Malta, which is what I had pulled up to go into. But definitely,
go right ahead.
I'm gonna go into something else as well because of what you said. But I guess I'll start with Malta. But what you mentioned about the gas, and I have to say, I see gas wells all over these ancient sites, especially when I was doing my own field research. I would see a megalithic wall in Oklahoma, and there would be a horsehead well sitting right there. And I think the same thing's true with the star forts. They're definitely harvesting that energy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Perfect.
And I don't have to worry about audio because it's my blog post.
Oh yeah, make sure you check that audio. All right, there you go.
So I just wanted to share a little bit about Malta because Malta is like a Disney World of sea forts and stonemasonry. It's just absolutely mind-blowing what's there.
So New Earth has a great thing about that. It's amazing.
It's like, oh my God, how did they do that?
Unbelievable.
And so I didn't have any problems finding star forts when I was looking around Valletta, which is the capital city of Malta, which is an island republic that's between Sicily and the country of, come on, Tunis.
Sicily, Italy.
So it's between the island that the boot of Italy is kicking and the country of Tunis in North Africa.
Okay.
And Tunis is the site of the historical Carthage.
Oh, Tunisia. Yeah, Carthage.
Yeah, Tunis is the capital city of Tunisia. So it sits between those two countries.
Very familiar.
And it's not far from Egypt, and this.
Right, so it's the northern part of Africa, right across from the southern boot of Italy. Yep.
Yeah, and all the same architecture and infrastructure, it's all throughout there. So it's all throughout everywhere. So I'm finding these star forts all over the place. And during the days of the British Empire, they would just went right in there and sucked everything up and claimed it as their own. But all kinds of star forts there. And I'm just gonna kind of go through a lot of the stuff.
Go ahead. I'll be right back. Can you just go through this and I'll
Sure.
do your presentation? Give me
Yep.
30 seconds.
Okay. So cathedral looking buildings there. Theaters, the same street corner style of architecture is all over the world. I go into my thoughts about why they called theaters Orpheums, and Orpheus was a musician and poet said to have the ability to charm all living things, even stones, with his music. And I think it's a reference to putting us to sleep with movies and things like that. And this is the same style of architecture I was just talking about. This is Malta, this is Mexico, Merida, Mexico, this is Juarez, Mexico. This is in the Ukraine, this is Prince Edward Island, and this is in the country of Guinea in Africa. And one of the points that I want to make, there's a couple, when you see these in these protected harbors, typically you'll find these man-made jetties, and there's a lighthouse on either side. And I think I have an example of that with this one. Lighthouses are part of this system as well. So you've got this beautiful old masonry with the lighthouses. Again, multiple examples. You see that at the port of Dover in England, same idea. But another thing I wanted to point out with these star forts is they were bombed during World War II. So Fort St. Elmo here, which stands, there's like 3 star forts in a row here. And on the first day that Malta became involved in World War II, they started bombing these places.
Of course.
And that story is over and over again. I'm just going to scroll through here real quick because there's just a ton of information, and we'd be here all day if I went through everything. And I just want to try to highlight some things. I realize I meander through my work here, but it brings up stuff a lot of times that's important to bring out, and how the original civilization was actually put together, and then what happened to change the narrative, which is what we're taught in school.
Michelle, you can go right ahead and do your thing with that, because I like to underline that you're extremely good with that, and that's one of the things that I look to you and look up to you for, because you really do get into the literature and compare and contrast against the mainstream timeline and history as to what we see, and try to put it all together. So I think that's, yeah, obviously you can hammer on that for sure, because that's your work on that is amazing.
And I went there, when I first started doing this work, I was just following the alignments. And when I did that, all this other stuff came out. And that's how I started getting into the history, because of the, again, I can't say it enough, because of the absolutely ridiculous stories they tell us about how things got there, because they're trying to hide the existence of this civilization. And if you even look at it at all, it falls apart. And as we go through this presentation, we're just going to give you more examples of that, because it's asinine. So you see the cotton arrow lines here in Valletta, and you see the bastions, Star City. And we're told that it was built in the 17th and 18th centuries to form the outer defenses of these, I guess what's the 3 cities of Valletta. There's these little communities around the main part. And then you get, a mud flood looking effect here as well. It's massive infrastructure on the inside, said to have been built in the 1530s. I mean, how'd they have the technology according to the history that we're taught? And oh, by the way, this is the Inquisitor's Palace in Malta. So the Inquisition comes in, and then they just start torturing people. How did we get to this place we are today at such a low level of consciousness collectively? These kinds of things have been happening to humanity with the controllers' plans to take everybody, everything over. and bringing in torture and all that kind of stuff. But today, the Inquisition is called the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. So you wouldn't know that the Inquisition still exists today. They want to bring in this dogmatic thinking, and you have to believe a certain way in order to get saved, or be a good Catholic, or whatever the case may be. So I'm just going to scroll down because, like I said, there's just a ton of star forts here in Valletta. And this is the only place in Malta I have really studied. I'm sure if I did a deep dive on Malta, I would have my work cut out for me. So it's interesting. I did an interview the other day, and I didn't think to mention this, but the whole subject of mer people came up, mermaids and mermen, and were they real? And you've got these statues all over the place showing half men, half fish. So I'm just going to throw that out there because it came up earlier this week.
The Phoenician coming from the water. That's what Martin Liedtke would say. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Martin, Flat Earth British.
So they are in statues in different places. This is in Sicily, in Catania in Sicily. And there was the one that I showed you in Valletta, which is the first one, because that's why I started going down the Triton rabbit trail in this. So the main city gate of Valletta from 1871 is when it was supposed to have been built. Most of the city gates have been changed or destroyed in Valletta. This is what remains of the Opera House, which was bombed during World War II. Okay, so that's what's left. They've turned it into an open-air theater. It was said to have been built in 1866. More mud flood-looking appearance, and then it was bombed during World War II.
Of course.
And that story's repeated over and over again. But this is kind of what I wanted to show you. I mean, this is rock cut.
Yeah, the Malta anomalies with the Star Fort is, so what comes to mind is, I have it in the questions, but I might as well address it now, is it's in this one actually, in the Malta episode. Oh yeah, you're already ahead of me. Because Brian Forster, we come from the megalithic intrigue, and Brian Forster, his work is I guess second to none in that department.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just saying, check out Paul Cook's channel also.
Oh yeah,
he's done great work on that, on everything. He's doing great work.
Oh,
and he's he lived there. He lived in Malta.
Malta, right? He did, yeah.
And so
you get him on one of these with Cam and everything.
Yeah, he's one that you really want to look really closely at. This city, Valletta. I recommend his videos highly.
I remember,
he's actually there.
About Malta, where he goes on the street views, is really cool. Yeah, and then so to extrapolate off of that and kind of combine disciplines here, if you will, with the megalithic and I guess the alternate history that we research. Brian Forster, I pull from him, for example, when you see something like Malta, because he'll say with the stuff that he sees in Peru, that different styles of construction indicate different civilizations, and I see that here in Buffalo. Granted, the War of 1813 allegedly burned everything down. There's still merit to that, to hold that to what we see at Malta, what you're going through. He specifically says different styles of construction indicate different cultures or civilizations.
I want to go back to what I was just showing you from Google Earth, but that's why I went down that way a little bit. So to give you some perspective, this is that elevator. And I pulled this out because if you just look at the depth of the stonework here, I mean, how in the heck did they do that? And when did they do that? Because it's really ancient looking place in ancient stonework. And so this is another view of where the Baraka lift is.
Look at that.
And it just give you an idea of the depth of this place. And that's just one piece. And this was said to have been constructed in 1905, closed in 1973, dismantled in 1983, and that a new lift was inaugurated in 2012. So what's that, what's going on here? Why do that if it's working perfectly well? And again, that's, they say a lot of these massive stonemasonry structures were in poor condition, so they had to tear it down and build a new building of infinitely inferior quality.
And then that's where they obfuscate that's where the rubber meets the road, where they obfuscate the history and where the literature gets all jarbled, because they can't, the truth is baked into the crust here, as far as I'm concerned, and they can't fully do it completely where you can't see through it, right? We pick those holes out all day long with the research that, we do. Campbell, Autodidactic, Paul, yourself, everybody who's in the community, it's all. That's why I kind of like to have everyone together and on the same page. We can certainly disagree, but this kind of stuff there's merit to all getting different opinions and, what we're doing now. And you know what, actually, who made a great point. There you go, Canna Dummy. Thank you. So let's move right on to the next question.
You asked me a multi-level question the last time, and I just started in Malta, but what do I think is going on here? I think it's very sophisticated circuitry.
Energy, right? How was it harnessed?
It's energy, the electromagnetic grid system. It was how it was set up, and there's so many directions I can go off on this, but I'm going to start here because this is where I kind of made a discovery from doing the research. And these are based on comments that I had received from people on places to look. And this is where I started with this last series because somebody suggested looking into Shepherd's Bush, which is in West London, which is part of the White City district, is part of it. And Wormholt is there, and I've done an interview with him about Wormholt because that's a fascinating place as well. But there were these exhibitions, the White City, 1908 Franco-British exhibition. And, again, it's another example of the original infrastructure being used for World's Fairs. And they had like 6 of them in a short period of time, one right after the other. And we're also told that this stadium was built for the Olympic Games in 1908, which was held at the same time. So the stadium came up, World Fairs, no longer there. I wanted to show you the flip flap that was at the exhibition.
Look at that.
And the Moorish architecture that's here. But to me, that was probably had some kind of generative function on the grid. So the ancient civilization that actually built these parks were using it somehow to enhance energy, and I'm sure have people have a good time at the same time. Yeah, there's something going on here because trolley parks are connected with this, and these amusement parks were always at the end of trolley lines. They were one terminus of these trolley lines, and a lot of times starports were a terminus.
Michelle, let me say something here, because this is kind of parallel to what we're doing when I was speaking with Philip about the mining, because that looks like one of those conveyor things that you can easily just send the stuff up and pour stuff over and cover stuff up with mining extra, and which is one thing that I think might be what we're seeing is like them actually literally covering stuff over. That would be spoil tips or whatever, or the mining tailings, right? Because we're speaking about gas mining. Mining was known in ancient history. We're said that the Chinese were the first to do it and run gas for the mainstream. They knew about it, and especially with Philip has videos of it too. New Earth, they were possibly pulling gas from these things. And if there is, if the narrative is to try to cover the, you know, the robber barons, the Industrial Revolution may have been just them covering all this stuff up. And as someone who would be, it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, as a robber baron would think. Kind of in the light of how Philip was saying, mining kind of makes, you know, practical sense too. You know, move it over and you can just wash it all down and literally use the excess to cover stuff up. I propose, and I think that some of it might be them covering up, and those trusses that you just showed could be dual purpose and used for that also, just to cover things up, because it's actually used in mining now. Those things. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think there was just a completely integrated system. Whatever was going on with these parks, because they're surfacing all over the place. They've all been destroyed. You know, these original locations of exhibitions and so forth. Maybe a few buildings standing here and there, but for the most part, they've been destroyed. And the trolley parks, the trolleys are gone. So I think all the rail lines, railroads and subways and electric streetcars, I think that was all part of this system, this free energy system.
Yeah, and they might have
it was all over the earth. So let me just go on down here real quick, because this part's about those world fairs. I'm doing the research for it. I'm making connections back to previous research. Let's see. And I do think the purpose of these exhibitions and expositions is to tell us the story that they want us to know.
agree.
One is a device. There are two definitions of the word exposition. One is a device used to give background information to the audience about the setting and characters of the story. And the other definition is that it's used in television programs, movies, literature, plays, and music. So what better way to tell your audience the story you want them to believe than the definition of an exhibition or trade show? So they're setting the stage for us. This is what they want us to know about history. So here was the track for the White City Stadium that we're told. We talked about the Olympic Games that were held there. And then it became host to the English Greyhound Derby between 1927. It was closed in 1984, and it became BBC White City today, because the stadium itself was demolished in 1985.
I like how they always put like activities and games over these things, baseball stuff, or parks, golf courses. It seems like it's a mock. You're playing over the old world.
It's part of that, but I think there's an energy function going on here. I think they're harvesting energy.
It's dual purpose.
And
duality.
It's performance enhancing, but they're also making a heck of a lot of money with the people that are there betting on dogs and horses and cars. And there's gambling in a lot of these places. So they're just making a ton of money
Babylon.
with this. So Shepherd's Bush tram terminus, trains are gone. These electric streetcars replaced by buses in 36. And this story is repeated all over the world. It went from this, low cost, low polluting form of transportation that was all over the world, and replaced them with buses. And so part of their scam. So when I was looking at all the stuff in Shepherd's Bush, I was reminded of Sulphur Springs in Tampa, which I visited last summer and did a whole study of. It was the last field research that I did, because I was drawn by the water tower that was there. And then I looked around the whole area. And I noticed that Heathrow Airport is in this kind of relationship to Shepherd's Bush, to where the White City would have been. And this is Sulphur Springs in Florida, and there's a racetrack there as well, which I knew because I visited there. So I remembered the racetrack. Okay, so I saw this angular relationship here. It's pretty close. You get the oxbows, which is another feature. All rivers are like this. I mean, the Thames is like that in London. There's something going on with energy as well with these. So anyway, there's water towers in both places. But I was really drawn there by the racing track. And Sulphur Springs used to have a little park there. And Busch Gardens is in this same area. And this is where the race course is today, the Greyhound track. It's been closed for a while. Sulphur Springs was the northernmost terminus of the streetcar lines here. So you see that pattern developing. And again, that's something I'm finding over and over again. The trolley tracks are removed. The evidence is gone.
Of course.
They still have a little bit of a functioning one.
Michelle, that one video that you had where there's the tram lines in the middle of the jungle, and there's no other, that's like proof positive for sure that the narrative is shot. Like
Definitely.
No
I mean,
that's like, yeah. So when you say the grid, that's a logical thought progression that we're on a grid, we're on some kind of lattice grid, and you can harness it somehow. The mechanism is unknown. I don't know. Obviously, they remove components, but I forget what video it is of yours, but it's like in the middle of.
It's in the middle of the jungle. It's Manaus in Brazil. It's like the heart of the Amazon rainforest.
And there's proof of electric tram lines there. And there's no other like roads around it. And it's like, oh yeah, that was an eye opener for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's another one of those ridiculous stories.
Unbelievable. Like we're the conspiracy theorists for like pointing it out, like the unbelievably ridiculousness of it.
Like it was supposed to have been built in the 19th century by the European colonizers, and there's no roads there. There's a road now. It's like 400 miles long, and it's like the worst road in Brazil.
But they had tram lines. Electric trolley tram lines. Fascinating.
So this is in Sulphur Springs. So the old Greyhound racing track is here. So we're talking about another ellipse. And then there's a track right here, and Busch Gardens is right here.
Okay.
And I made a connection between Busch Gardens and Shepherd's Bush. I mean, what's going on with the bush? But so I'm starting to notice these geometric relationships with all of these ellipses.
Your star tetrahedron, the flower of life. Yeah.
This is Las Vegas. Imagine the electricity that's going on there. I mean, there's something going on. And again, they're taking full advantage of it. So I wanted to start there because that is leading me to find that same relationship between international airports and other airports even, and racetracks. And then in doing the research for that, I'm also finding historical trolley parks and springs, like hot springs and mineral springs. And they all seem to be connected together. So I found this relationship to a racetrack that's a thoroughbred horse racing venue, Toronto Pearson International Airport.
Toronto. We have
here in Toronto.
We have one of these old stadiums here, Michelle. Old War Memorial Stadium. It's called the old Rock Pile where the Bills used to play, actually, and it was actually an old reservoir. I have a video on that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's there to find, and I